Well, hey everyone, by now you know the Groove Washer as the best record cleaner in the world, but did you also know the Groove Washer is a great way to ensure your records are preserved correctly? You know, other record cleaners, God knows what chemicals they contain, but the Groove Washer's G2 fluid is designed especially for record cleaning to leave no residue, so you can store your vinyl after cleaning with confidence. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record shop or head over to groovewasher.com where record cleaning kits start at just $15. Plus, I tell you what, here's a promo code that will get you 10% off anything at groovewasher.com. Just type in Vinyl Guide 10 at checkout, and there you go. Preserve your vinyl and make it last longer than you with the Groove Washer. Available at groovewasher.com. 10% off with promo code Vinyl Guide 10. And hey, record collectors, you gotta also know about Seams Easy record jacket repair strips. All record collectors and crate diggers I highly recommend should have an ample supply of the Seams Easy record jacket repair strips. Seams Easy fixes seam splits from the inside of the jacket, turning a borderline junk record sleeve into a functioning part of your vinyl collection. Just go to seamseasy.com, that's Seams Easy with 2 Z's, seamseasy.com, and grab a pack of 10, 25, or the big bulk lot of 100, and have some Seams Easy record jacket repair strips handy for the next time you stumble upon a garage sale. Fix up seam splits with Seams Easy. Seams Easy? That's because it is. And with that, let's start this week's episode of The Vinyl Guide.
Hey, this is Colin Newman of Goyer, and you're listening to The Vinyl Guide.
Do you listen to and collect vinyl records? Well, you're in luck. Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast made for record nerds like yourself. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate here. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. As you can tell from my voice, I'm still struggling a bit with my health. I've had a persistent cough for the last few weeks, and no, it's not COVID. I've been tested twice now, but no doctor wants to see me in their office, so I have to do all my medical appointments over the phone. So, not the best way to get that done, but understandable in the current environment. It's getting marginally better, but I'll definitely be glad when this thing is over. Anyway, I'll be all right, even though my chest is killing me. My ears are just fine. I've been spinning some records. Been enjoying my continued isolation. I tell you, this pandemic really plays to my strengths. Sitting at home, listening to music, conducting interviews remotely, making the podcast. I ain't complaining. This is all right. I can do this. Now, this week on the show, I am very excited to be speaking with one of the key architects of the post-punk movement, Mr. Colin Newman of the amazing band Goyer. Now, I'm going to admit I've come late to Goyer. It's only in the last maybe 10, 12 years I've become familiar with the band and their works, but it's now to the point of being a voracious listener of their catalog. Goyer released their debut LP, Pink Flag, in 1977, and have continued to be a major influence on generations of musicians and music fans ever since. And while many of their albums, including Pink Flag and Chairs Missing, continue to be honored on many of the critical must-listen or best albums of whatever lists by the likes of Rolling Stone, NME, etc., that's really just the beginning of the story of Goyer. In fact, they are in the third act of a brilliant career and have even released 2 albums in 2020 that I am enjoying immensely, Hive and 1020. Now, we're going to talk about these releases today, as well as Goyer's historical releases from the late 70s on the Harvest label, their own label, Pink Flag, and various other projects and recordings available at pinkflag.com. You can go there now, have a look around. You could even hear the new albums Hive and 1020 on all streaming services, and of course, you could pick up the vinyl at your local record shop or at pinkflag.com. Now, by the way, what you're hearing today is a portion of the full interview with Colin. I have an extended interview available only to show patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. For a couple of bucks a month, you can join our community at patreon.com/vinylguide. You help keep the Vinyl Guide show going. You help buy me cough drops. And of course, you get access to extended interviews, secret episodes, exclusive content, guides, and more. That's up at patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Join now, and you could be hearing the extended interview with Colin within moments. And again, thank you for your support. And if you like today's conversation with Colin, there are a ton of other interviews we've done on the Vinyl Guide you may want to check out, including episode 223 featuring Mike Watt, the Saint of San Pedro, collaborator with the Wire Fellas and the Project Fitted. It's a great conversation with the wonderful Mike Watt. Episode 223 of the Vinyl Guide. Episode 217 featuring Billy Gould of Faith No More and Talking Book. Episode 211 with Buzz Osborne of Melvins. Episode 204 with Philip Jameson of Caspian. Episode 190 of the Vinyl Guide, where we were joined by Peter Holmstrom of the Dandy Warhols. Episode 182 featuring a conversation with Jellyfish founder and Beck collaborator Roger Joseph Manning Jr., plus heaps more. You can find all our episodes at thevinylguide.com. They're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Sonnet, or wherever you get your podcasts. And with that, let's start today's conversation with Colin Newman of Wire. Hello, Colin.
Hi, Nate. Hi, how you doing?
I'm okay. How are you today?
I'm good. You just caught me on the hop, but I'm here, ready and willing now.
Oh, excellent. You got yourself a nice cup of tea or coffee or whatever morning beverage you need?
I will be doing that shortly. Actually, that's reminded me. I can make something to go along with, but.
Now, these days with the whole pandemic and everything, how are you communicating with the band? You're not doing Zoom calls, you just phone? Or are you actually getting together?
We are not doing Zoom calls, no. Basically, email the same way that we normally communicate, because we don't all live in the same country anyway. Mm-hmm. Email and phone calls as and when needed, really. It's been a strange period. We were in the middle of an American tour. Mm-hmm. We got to Chicago in sort of late Feb, and already aware that there was something going on. And I remember after we rehearsed, we went out to a restaurant afterwards, and it was absolutely rammed. And I just thought, well, if someone in this room has got it, everyone in this room has got it. And it was preying on my mind. I mean, not everybody in the band was thinking about it that much. Tour started off really well, sort of really good audiences. We got around, we sort of drove in a loop and got round to Atlanta in Georgia, which was a big show and, a big capacity of place. It looked pretty close to being full, but when I went afterwards to the settlement with the promoter, he said, well, actually, you realize 150 ticket buyers didn't turn up. And it's like, oh, right, okay, this starts to become a thing. And, 3 days later, by the time we hit New York, we're talking 50%. Ooh. Turning up of ticket buyers, and definitely New York didn't feel safe. I already knew that I wanted to come home. I'd already had the conversation with our agent. He said, look, there's going to be no penalty if you just decide that you want to come home. No worries, don't worry about it. There won't be any consequence of that. You just come home, you just tell me when you want to get home, and we'll figure out the flights and the rest of it. And the day after New York, we were due to play in Boston, and that morning, as we were driving up, the governor of Massachusetts said, no gigs, no gatherings over 250. That means we were over, So we kind of took the decision. We could have gone on and played in Canada. We had a couple of dates in Canada, but we were just starting to feel like it had sort of dawned on the band that we really should be going home, and literally pulled off the motorway, took the decision. Within 4 hours, we were on flights back home. It's like really was that sudden. And there was a film, we're doing a documentary at the moment, and there was a film crew actually in New York who'd flown out from Britain and to film the second New York show, and they were staying in the city for an extra day to do a couple of interviews. And Malcolm said to me when they'd come back, oh God, we were on like the last flight out before they closed everything up. But the day that we flew out, which was just the day before, the airport was half empty. The flight was virtually nobody on it. It was kind of smooth. Got back in, I brought I got the bags in the door. Malcolm said, all right, we're cleaning everything. She's not paranoid. She's just thoughtful. Right. And we cleaned all the luggage as I came in the door, and more or less went into lockdown at that point. So there, everybody went home, and we've obviously been communicating by email and a bit by phone since, but there are some things to discuss, obviously rescheduling of shows that were supposed to happen, but it's all a little bit theoretical. The industry seems to have decided that next year is going to be okay. We've got a rescheduled European tour in March, and we're in the process of rescheduling an American tour that was supposed to take place later this year for next May. Whether or not those things are going to happen, I don't know.
So in the meantime, how are you keeping yourself busy? You doing recording? Are you sending tracks back and forth to the guys? Still being creative?
No. This year was always going to be a release year, not a making records year. Mm-hmm. Last year and the year before was making records, and we have 2 releases this year. Don't really need to be making any more right now. There is an issue with you don't want to put too many things in the marketplace, and Wire not only has a big catalogue, or Pink Flag, our label, not only has a big catalogue, but part of what we do is attempt to release all Wire releases. So putting together releases of stuff from the archive and stuff like that, that is also part of our ongoing thing. So, a new Wire album, realistically, we did one in 2017, and then we decided quite consciously to leave it 3 years before the next one, because there'd been an album in 2015, an album in 2016, and an album in 2017, and that felt like there were too many records.
You got to leave them wanting more. Yeah,
you got to leave a little while for things to sink in. So there was a gap, and then the second release for this year, 10/20, was originally intended to be a record store day, but obviously the best laid plans. Mm-hmm. Now it is out as an official release on a date that we'd originally decided to release the CD on, but we are very, very happy to support Record Store Day, and it's about bricks and mortar retail, or even more straightforwardly, it's about not Amazon. Amazon is convenient for everybody. I have an Amazon account. I order stuff from Amazon all the time, but we have to be aware that bricks and mortar shops are quite important.
Oh, yeah.
And they're especially important within our industry, that it's the chance. You're never, ever going to beat that point when you walk into a record shop and they're playing something behind the counter, and you go to the person behind the counter and say, what the fuck's that? And either that's the worst record I've heard in my life, or that's absolutely brilliant, I want it now.
And there's two other people in the shop that are wanting it, the same record.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe two other people hating it and you loving it. It's all part of what is good about record stores, but at the same time, Record Store Day has got its own little internal logic, and there was a bit of discussion within the industry about what they were going to do. And meanwhile, we had manufactured a pile of vinyl, which we can't just afford to sit on. So in the end, we just said, okay, we're going to release it. We'll support Record Store Day next year.
So let me jump into that, because we do talk a lot of vinyl here. So with Pink Flag as the record company, you guys now control all your recordings and the legacy of Wire albums. Is that all now under your control?
Not everything, but anything that is, anything that isn't currently controlled by Pink Flag is certainly something that we are attempting to get our hands on.
Okay, but all the major releases, the things going back to the Pink Flag album, Chairs Missing,
the 70s catalog, all of the 70s catalog, and everything since 2000.
Okay.
Is basically what we own.
All right. And with Pink Flag, it sounds like you do your own manufacturing as well. So you order vinyl and then it gets distributed through Pink Flag, or you connect with a distributor to do it, right?
No, we have a distributor. A distributor. I mean, we have a, it goes, these relationships go back a long way. But fundamentally it's a P&D deal. The record company is basically me. There are no employees, right. So it's up to me to figure out how to release it. But I've been running record label for a long time. I mean, Malka, my wife, and I have a label called Swim, which goes back to the early 90s. So I came to the concept of Pink Flag with already having had quite a lot of experience about how to release records. Although this changes over time, the sort of mechanics of making a master and making that into products hasn't changed. It's more to do the things that changes is what some of the products are, because you have digital releases as well, and how you promote those releases, which has definitely changed.
So you're thoroughly entrenched. I mean, obviously the recording and the writing of the material, but also the cover art, the type of paper stock, the weight of the vinyl that gets selected, the color of the records. Those are all your decisions.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we work with designers. I mean, it's not. We've done the last quite few Pink Flag releases we've worked with a guy called John Wozencroft, and he basically takes care of the look. This is discussed with the band, obviously, sometimes quite hotly. The look of the products. I absolutely and totally do not want to be involved in any record company that releases vinyl which is any other color than black. Colored vinyl is a gimmick, and it's not only a gimmick, it's a way of exploiting fans who will buy it. If we were to release Pink Flag on pink vinyl, then there are a whole bunch of people who would buy it simply because it's on pink vinyl, even though they own the record and probably own the record on 4 formats already. I think that's exploitative. I don't want to go there. I don't think we should be that kind of record company.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting, because I'm sure a lot of fans would love to support the band, and if it means, getting a second copy or buying a record and a CD and a T-shirt and a few other things, they're okay with that. You don't feel so easy with that, though. Well,
if you look at when we did the re-releases of Pink Flag, Chairs Missing, and 154 in 2018, what we did was we released in three physical formats, vinyl. Because vinyl records, are required and they sell, and people will have old, worn-out copies. People will have never bought it on vinyl. People will have unfortunately also bought bootlegs, and we try to steer them towards a legitimate product. And then regular CD, which everybody says doesn't sell, but actually we sell CDs. We sell quite a lot of CDs, actually. And then we also do something we call special editions, which is a book edition. And these were basically done because there's a lot of our older fans, particularly, who will have bought those records several times. They were originally released in the 70s. They were released on CD in the 80s. They were re-released in other mastered versions a bit later. There's been iterations of those, and people have gone along and bought them. And so instead of saying to people, yeah, well, here's another, slightly remastered version, a slightly nicer cover. Actually, here we have every relevant track. So you've got not only the album, you've got the demos, you've got the singles, the B-sides, anything that was in the entire archive. Mm-hmm. Everything that was in that archive is on those releases, the relevant release. So if you buy that, and then it's also a book, an 80-page bound book with pictures, text about the record or whatever. So you really feel like, yes, it costs a bit more than a regular CD, but you're getting something which you haven't got already.
Right.
And those things I think are really important. And the other thing that we did was that we did, just for Record Store Day, we did a box set of 7 inches, just because people love that stuff. And we probably could have made twice as many as we made, because they just went like absolute hotcakes.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a bit about the catalog here, because very wide and diverse catalog. Right now, the vinyl versions that are getting pressed of some of the older albums, Chairs Missing, Pink Flag, etc., those are from the original tapes. Do you have the original tapes, the original artwork and everything?
Yeah, we do. Well, basically, it's a bit of a story, but what happened? I'll do a sort of long story short. When EMI went tits up back in I can't remember when it was, a back end of 2000s, something like that. They were bought by Warner's, and Warner's realised as they acquired EMI, what was happening was 3 majors were becoming 2, and they were almost bound to be sat on by the antitrust laws in the EU. So they thought, okay, well, we're going to do that. We're going to get this anyway. So how can we sort of make the best of this? And so they teamed with some of the independent organizations like Merlin, and decided that what they were going to do is they were going to get rid of some of the catalog to independent labels. And they set that up as a way of avoiding the antitrust thing, because it's possible the EU might have made them sell all of it. So they obviously wanted to hang on to the things they wanted to hang on to. So they weren't being entirely unselfish. This kind of dragged on for a while. Unfortunately, the way it was set up was that artists were not allowed to buy their own catalogue. And this was because this is the way everybody thinks in the music industry. They think artists, oh yeah, Pink Floyd. Well, if Pink Floyd buy their catalogue, which I'm sure they could afford to do, they could just sell it to Sony for a profit. And this was what the whole thing was aimed not to do. But they don't think about an organisation like Pink Flag is fairly unusual, an artist-owned record company that actually has a decent catalogue. And it took a while for me to sort of drill down to how we could get that catalogue, but in the end I found the right combination of questions to ask to the right person, and who happened to be Martin Mills from Beggars, and we ended up getting that catalogue back end of 2017. Our distributors, Cargo and State 51, paid for it because we didn't have it cost quite a lot of money, but we took moral ownership. I must say the large amount of money was paid back in 8 months by the releases. I mean, we did so well with the catalogue by re-releasing it in formats that people wanted to buy. So it's proved to be, nobody, our distributors are people that we've worked with for years, and they have a kind of a lot of respect and, friendship there, but, they don't take decisions with large amounts of money based on friendship. It's kind of like, they knew they were going to make their money back. I don't think anybody expected. I mean, we were thinking 2 years, So, I mean, it's been, and it has been life-changing. The one of the most interesting things is the actual archive actually didn't go anywhere. The EMI archive is in Hayes in Middlesex, and it's actually one of the best storage places for that kind of material. The EMI were very good at looking after their archive, and so it's just basically stayed there. So we wanted new copies of the masters, no problem. So that was basically what we did. I mean, we got.
They just moved shelves.
I was not going to be sending, 40-year-old master tapes out to be cut. We just took the highest possible quality digital copies, way higher quality than you could possibly audibly hear any difference, and then we used that for the mastering. So I think to send off 40-year-old master tapes to a cutting room to get made into records is just absurd. You just don't take a risk with something that valuable. And to dub it onto another vinyl, that's losing a generation. That's actually just, it doesn't matter how good the machines are, so I don't really have, I'm not an analog obsessive. Analog is useful for what it's useful for.
Did the original art stay intact? Did you have that, or did that have to be recreated?
Yes, we were able to. They had, in fact, EMI had re-released everything back in the 2000s. So we were involved in putting those releases together, or I was anyway. So I had artwork from then. So they'd already made high resolution copies of the original artwork.
Now, going back to that time, 1977, Pink Flag was released really under the backdrop of punk music, and there's a lot of sensationalism. And Wire was labeled as punk. Did the band find that troubling?
Well, the thing is that were you my age and had you been living in Britain, you wouldn't have asked that question, because Wire was not labelled as punk.
Okay.
Wire was not regarded as a punk band in the 70s because we were considered to be too different and too arty, too weird. We played slow pieces. The term post-punk was not invented until the early 2000s, so there wasn't really a term for what we did, but we were the first band that did it, whatever that was. And we were we considered ourselves to be influenced by punk, but not punk. We were the next thing. That was we deliberately designed ourselves to be that as well.
Oh, okay. Did that meet EMI's expectations? I mean, you were assigned to
that was exactly. Remember, we were signed by Nick Mobbs as the guy who signed the Pink Floyd. There were people who referred to Wire as the Punk Floyd. So we were exactly the right. They'd got their fingers burned with the Pistols. The Pistols had turned out to be too hot to handle just because of people, people who worked at the company in the factory objecting to pressing up these records, which were critical of the Queen and stuff like that. So they couldn't. They couldn't have the Sex Pistols because by the time that all kicked off, the head of the company was he was a lord of some kind. I mean, it was all very establishment, and you couldn't, that was how Virgin ended up with them. And so they'd originally signed the number one punk band. They didn't need another punk band. They needed the next thing. That was basically what they were signing. They were. I mean, I asked Mike Thorne, who produced the first three albums and who was an A&R person also at EMI at the time. A few years later, when you first heard Wire, did you hear, the band that would make 154? He said, yes, absolutely. So I don't think that anyone thought that we were punk. We weren't signed because we were punk. We were signed because we weren't punk.
And the Harvest label was essentially kind of the prog end of
exactly
EMI, right? Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so was that were you when you came into the EMI fold? Did they say, "Well, Harvest is the best place for you," or was that the discussion really from day one?
Well, I think it was. I'm not sure how that worked, but it was Nick Mobbs that signed us, and he was responsible for a lot of the acts on that label. As it was, he'd originally signed the Pink Floyd, and but they'd also, when we first went to EMI, there was an element of a gentleman's club. I mean, a lot of those Harvest artists, I mean, like Kevin Ayers, and there were people who were left field-ish in their kind of music, and it was like, well, we've got all these really cool artists, and some of them sell and some of them don't really sell, but we'll put their records out anyway. And during the 3 years we were at EMI, all that changed when the sort of commercialism, suddenly it was hit to be commercial.
And being artistic in a very commercial business, how did that work over time? Because if you were signed because you weren't punk and you were kind of that next step, as you continued that journey, did that create any challenges?
Well, the thing is that, the band we were in some ways fully formed, at least by 78. I mean, all of the kind of things that you see in Wire now is there. I mean, there's a sort of experimental side, but there's also a pop side. So we never didn't produce singles. They weren't hits. That was the problem. But I mean, it wasn't that we kind of lacked in the potential for commercialism. But by 79, 80, we were getting great reviews, but we weren't what EMI needed. That what they needed was, what they wanted was something like Duran Duran, who also had started off having a bit of an arty kind of thing to them, but they were basically able to be pop stars. Wire weren't really able to be pop stars. It was an artistic venture. But then as we kind of went on, what happened was, because we kind of stopped at the beginning of the 80s, when we sort of came back round again, the whole new generation of people who were running independent labels, they'd all been Wire fans. So it was like, because we weren't obscure in the late 70s at all, we were kind of hip. And so whether it be, either Watts Russell or, Jeff Travis, those people were, they were Wire fans. So, it was, and of course Daniel Miller, and that was how we ended up on Mute. We ended up on Mute because Daniel was a Wire fan and thought, well, here is the golden age of somebody, Wire can produce pop records, they can do videos, they've got all this arty credibility, there's everything about them, this band should be hugely successful. And in some ways we were in the 80s. I mean, we were all over Eardrum Buzz was played to death on MTV. I mean, we certainly were, always in the upper reaches of the indie charts and stuff like that. So we did very well commercially in the 80s.
But early on, did you know that you were influencing? Like, for instance, the pebble drops in the pond. Were you able to see the waves as they went out, seeing how it was impacting people across the ocean, Discord, and some of the other independent labels? Were you aware of that, or was that completely out of view?
Well, in the beginning, it was more in Britain. I mean, there was strangely our kind of influence, although we were at that point based in London, our influence tended to be amongst especially northern bands. And so like the early people who, like I remember with Cabaret Voltaire supported us and said, you guys are amazing. You're our biggest influence. Seemingly Joy Division also. I haven't heard that directly. I heard that indirectly, that they claimed Wire as a big influence. And I've heard that U2 used to cover Mannequin. There was a generation of British bands who were definitely influenced by Wire in the early 80s. But then there was the whole American hardcore thing was something that we really didn't know anything about until much, much later, because what happened in Britain was that if there was anything that was out by the time you got to the middle of the 80s, it was hardcore or punk rock, basically. Punk and hardcore was punk rock, and punk music was just out. It had huge influence in America. There were points when Britain and America are quite close in terms of taste. I mean, there was, sort of 77. New York and London had similar kind of scenes. By the mid-80s, they were really diverse. I mean, Britain was more like Europe. I mean, it was clean, it was synth-based, it was pop. That was the kind of music that everyone was centered around, whereas America was still kind of in that sort of, it was hardcore, it was distorted guitars, it was all those, it was a really different thing. So really we just ignored hardcore.
When it comes to sales and reception of those early records, was Pink Flag and Chairs Missing at the time, were they considered a success, or was it still an investment from EMI to see where the band went?
They didn't turn a profit until somewhat later. So if you turn a profit, depending on how you view it, they will have turned the profit much earlier for the company. But in terms of how the advances were structured, so they would give the band an advance of a certain amount of money, and this money would not be recouped until that percentage, of which a very small percentage of the total earnings, which was due to the band, by that money got recouped, and obviously each year that advance would go up. So in the 70s, we didn't recoup our advances. That doesn't mean to say that they didn't make a profit. It just means that based on the percentage they offered us, they did they did eventually recoup. I mean, they were well recouped by the time we bought the catalogue.
Because the way I saw the catalog go, and correct me if this is the wrong way to look at it, with Pink Flag and then Chairs Missing, it seems to then build up to 154, because with 154, there's a greater investment. There's an extra 7-inch along with the record. There's also the boutique label. It wasn't just the normal Harvest label. You guys were able to create art even on the record label. Am I misunderstanding that?
I think I don't think that wasn't as a result of us having been more successful. It was just an indulgence by EMI. I think they might have said, "Oh, we can, let's put an extra 7-inch as a piece of marketing." They weren't expecting, an EP of left field stuff. We had plans. Why in the 70s? Let's put it like this: that system, the way that record companies used to work, and I guess major labels still work like that, is at the beginning of a recording of a record. So in other words, if you do a record a year or something like that, you get an advance. Okay, and that's the money that you earn. That's your living. Okay, so you live off that money, make the record, deliver it to the record company, and they sell it. Well, if you don't recoup your advance, the next money you see is your next advance. And at that point, we were not making any money on the road. So literally the only money that we were seeing was the record company advances. That doesn't really train you to have any understanding or appreciation of how the market works for your music. You have no concept. So we had no concept. We did not think. We just thought it was like a sort of command economy of us, as far as we were concerned. We want to do this, and this is what we'll do. So I remember when Mike Thorne came into the studio at the beginning of 154, he'd just come from a meeting at EMI, and he said, "Well, this is what we've all decided, that we need to have more singles. So let's make an album of singles." And the band just looked at him like, basically, fuck off. We're going to make the album. We're going to make, so. They were not very happy when we announced that we weren't even going to tour 154. We didn't tour it. Oh, okay. We just did a series of events at a theatre called the Jeanette Cochrane in London. We did a week of events, and they were well attended, but that's hardly getting out on the road and touring it. Again, you see, the thing is that if you have a situation where the only money that the artist sees is the advance, and they don't make any money on the road, what is the encouragement to go on the road? That's right. We had literally no encouragement to go on the road. I mean, we did not have great management who kind of got. You have to think big picture. You have to think, okay, how are these people going to be motivated to do the things that they perhaps don't want to do? Musicians are inherently lazy. And we'd had a pretty awful experience that year, 79. We'd done a tour supporting Roxy Music. This had been, not only was it something that we didn't enjoy, it was also something we had to pay for it. We had to pay to be on that tour. We got treated like shit, and it was depressing. I mean, this was not 1974 Roxy Music. This is 1979 Roxy Music. At that point, they were called Brian Ferry and Roxy Music. It was not the band they had been. And they were all very nice to us, but the crew didn't treat us particularly well, and it was just the audiences hated us. They didn't. What do they need this weird, moody bunch of gits playing when they've come to see their hero? So it was not. It was the middle of winter. It was kind of depressing, the whole thing, and we just had the general feeling, well, if that's what we're expected to turn into in order to be successful, we don't really want to do that. That's not very interesting. And there was no person around us saying, well, hang on, you should be doing this on your own terms. What you need to be doing is going back and playing those places in your own right. You'd be playing smaller shows, but you'd be playing to your audience, and let's figure out a way to make money out of this rather than you just, it costs so much for you to be on the road that you don't make any money, So this was really sort of how it was, and those truths did not dawn on the band until really in the 2000s. That was when we started to figure out, hang on, this is stupid. You have to make money out of this. You can't not make money. And by that point, I mean, there's the one basic rule of Pink Flag, was that everything has to make money. Even if it doesn't make very much money, it has to make some money. We can't just spend money on doing things. So we wouldn't do a tour that cost us so much money to do that we didn't make anything from it in the name of promotion. the way so many bands have. Why would you do that? You have to cut your cloth accordingly.
Well, yeah, that sort of return helps you do other projects and helps you
absolutely and having it means that there is there's a way. We've built up Pink Flag is a serious business now. I mean, I don't want to overstate it, but it would be very easy for people to imagine that, oh yeah, it's just some band record company. It has very valuable assets and turns over a serious amount of money.
There's a lot of innovation there as well. Like, for example, releasing those live sets from the history of the band, the legal bootlegs, I think you call them.
Yeah.
All those recordings that the band had across the years. Now, are those recordings the band sourced? Did you have them all these years, or are they from fans or radio broadcasts or other sources?
They come from so many different places. There's my partner on that is a guy called Mark Burser. Mark is he's actually a motoring journalist, amongst other things. But he's kind of obsessed with live recordings. Now, certain fans are really obsessed with live recordings. And we started talking, and he said, oh, you need to make them available. I said, look, we are not flooding the market with endless live recordings on CD. This is just not, nobody's going to want to buy a new record when it comes out. So I started thinking, well, what kind of strategy could work? Well, if you could have something that was quite bespoke and digital, and you went directly to that bit of the market of people who would be interested in that 90% or probably 99% of Wire's market is not interested in that stuff. That's what they want, the new record, and they want other older records. They don't want endless versions of one song recorded in a gig in whatever. But there are people who really want that kind of stuff. So the idea was we find the best source, and he came from that tape trading tradition, so he knew in many cases who had the best recording of a particular thing, and then we actually take it and master them, take it to our mastering engineer and have him actually master them like they were proper recordings. And then so you would have the best quality version of that thing that you could get. Some of them, the recordings are pretty lo-fi, but I mean, it's just, I mean, the band is not even slightly interested in this, in the music, in the content. It's not very creative. I can understand it. Me as a creative person, I'm not that interested in it. But as a record company person, I think, well, if you're in the business of curating things for your fans, for your audience, for the loyal people who really are interested in everything, here's some things that you can have. Mm-hmm. So we've done 2 series of those so far. And we even had a situation, there was one recording and somebody, after it had been released, somebody said, I've got a better version of that. And we said, okay, send us that version. We mastered that and replaced it and replaced everyone's version of it.
In that regard, because having those sort of bootlegs are really a godsend for someone who's a completionist, and you have this niche of fans, maybe couple thousand people who are really tuned into that sort of thing. And like you said, the rest would be they just want the new album. For people who are dabbling in this legal bootleg series, is there one or two that you would recommend that you start with so we can kind of audially revisit a legendary Wire gig?
The best ones tend to be the ones that come for free when you buy the whole series.
Okay.
So I think it depends. You look at the track list of the tracks and just think, well, we kind of slanted it towards it would be better value to buy the whole package. So, I mean, if you buy the package, you get 9 and you get a couple of free things as well. That was kind of the way that we weighted it. We didn't imagine most people wanted to buy one.
Well, let's put it this way. What's the one that you like the most? The one that you listened to and was like, oh man, that was, I love this one. This is a great night.
To be honest, I don't listen to any of them. But
you were there.
I would say I was there. I already been there. I already done it. There is. I'd have to check on the thing. There is one, and I forget the name of the venue, but it was a WIR recording from the early 90s. Might be the Mean Fiddler or something like that. It's in the 2nd series. That's kind of fascinating because of what we did. There are sort of mashups of, the riff from one song and the vocal from a different song kind of thing. And some of those things are quite funny to listen to. But otherwise it's like, it's like, I have yet the band who listens to their live recordings. Mm-hmm. I would say in common, every band I've ever met, if you play them live recordings, their interest wanes within seconds because all they hear is the mistakes and the fact that it's not mixed right. And, because unless someone has professionally multi-track recorded it and mixed it really sympathetically and got absolutely the best out of it, you're getting it's a board recording or it's somebody's been in a room with a microphone or something like that. So something's going to be too loud. So a lot of fans, they don't hear music like that, whereas musicians do. And, it's absolutely, there's a classic example of this, of another band, Minimal Compact, Malcolm's band. When we did we put out an album last year called Creative Perfect, which was sourced, the original recordings were from live gigs and then were somewhat enhanced, and including new re-recordings and stuff like that. But the basis of it was, and the original idea was to record the live gigs and then someone to do some mixes of that and put that with video as a sort of keepsake from the gigs. So somebody did some rough mixes of the tracks and literally got no reaction at all from the band. Nobody was interested. Because it's like nobody was listening to it thinking, that would sound great if you did this, this and this. They're like, oh god, yeah, God, we played shit that night. I know I made this mistake. Was flat. This is, you've got to. Part of the logic in a way of how Wire runs and how Pink Flag runs is that all that stuff is inherent within it. You have to understand that the core of it is a band, and bands for the most part aren't interested in live recordings. They just aren't. So we are the worst people to ask. The person you need to ask is Mark Burser, who will tell you exactly what all the best live gigs are, and how to, because he's a fan of that and he actually listened to it. There's a guy who comes to every single Wire gig and every single immersion gig and records everything and always sends recordings afterwards. And it's like fantastic, that's really great. It's good that I've got the documentation of it, but I'm not going to listen to
it. So let's talk about the studio recordings. Mind Hive. Is there a message or a theme for Mind Hive?
I don't think so. I think things do emerge. It's very much a record for 2020. It came about the way that all recent Wire records have, in that this will be very telling. What's the first thing is the release date. Okay, so we the previous album came out in 2017. It was a sort of roughly April 2017. And I'd already decided, that everybody agreed with me, that we weren't going to put out a record for 3 years. And I always think that January releases are a very good idea. January is a great time, under normal circumstances, to release a record, because there tends to be a big rush in two parts of the year. One is around April because of Record Store Day, and the other one is around September, October, sort of after the summer holidays. And there's been a lot of bands tour and a lot of releases going on, and your release will struggle to find promotion if you release in those two periods. I mean, Wire does okay, it's not that we can't release in those periods, but January is a fantastic time. I mean, nobody releases in December unless you've got like a greatest hits of something that's completely mainstream, but January is not only a good time to release records, it's also in normal times a very good time to tour, because people have sort of had enough of Christmas and they've had enough of being at home, and they're kind of like thinking about what to do next. And so January releases have always worked out really well for us. So I knew back at the beginning of the process, which started in 2018, that we were aiming for a January 2020 release. So that means the thing had to be really finished by kind of around September 2019. And then you just count back from there. We did the first recordings, I think, in September 2018. And then did some gigs, and then I brought the tracks here and worked on them. And then we went back and did sort of, I can't remember, it was probably April or May, or maybe it was March 2019, and did a second session. We often do that. It's like everybody records everything they can in the first session, and then I'll work on the tracks, and by that point quite a lot of decisions have been taken, and then people see if there's something they needed to change or make a better sound for, or we might do something with drums or whatever. And then you go on to we've done the last few records in Rockfield, and one of the things that we do is work in one studio on the first session and in the other studio on the second session, because they have different drum sounds, and combine the two. So then it was just basically a case of kind of finishing and mixing. I tend to do all my keyboards and vocals here. I try not to take up too much of the band's. It's expensive to be in a studio. We have a budget to be in the studio. We don't have a budget to be in the studio for weeks. Days. So we tend to try and be efficient.
And while you're doing Mind Hive, are you also doing parts of what became 1020 as well?
Well, the 1020 has is a typically Wire thing. It was a kind of a ruse. The original idea was to, because you have to go back to the 2017 set. 2017 set had various concepts in it, and some songs ended up in the 2017 set that wouldn't have got there had it not been to a certain way of conceptualizing what went in it. And they were Over There's, Small Black Reptile, and The Art of Persistence, all of which were older pieces. And I thought, well, let's bung them down while we're doing the session. So we recorded them, and the original idea was, well, maybe we can do a special edition on Mind Hive. Do a book version and then have them as extra tracks. And then what happened was, when we were recording, we had the documentary film crew came in one day, and I was starting to think, well, this session is going to be quite well documented with film. Do we really need another book with pictures of the band in Rockfield? What are we going to put in the book, And then I was talking to Phil from Cargo Distribution, and he said, well, what have you got for Record Store Day? So we haven't got anything. So, and then I described him about those extra tracks. So why don't you make something for Record Store? Why didn't you make it in something for Record Store Day? And then I started to think, well, hang on. It's like, you don't want to do 3 tracks. Well, we've got one that was left over from Silver Lead. I bet that would work. And then I thought about these Strays, which had been recorded as a free EP that we gave away with mail order copies of Red Bark Tree. And if you put the two together, that would be like an album. That'd be all right for Record Store Day. That's quite nice, isn't it? People would like that, especially if it's a record that stuff hasn't been available on physically paid format of any kind before, and putting it on vinyl, that'd be a good thing. So that was the concept, but nobody was prepared for the reality. And the reality was, when we put the record together, it's like, bloody hell, this is great. This is a great record. It was the record that nobody was expecting. Mm-hmm. It was a fantastic value because it cost bugger all to record, because it was just all recorded on other sessions for other things.
Right. So,
it was obviously an amount of time working here, and getting to mixes, and the Wolf Collides, which have been recorded for Silver Lead. The way of choosing tracks which go on albums, for Wire albums, is arcane, to say the least. The reasons for things being there and not being there can be really obscure. And I have no idea how Wolf Collides didn't end up being on 2017, but thank God it wasn't, because it ends up being a great track on 1020. And then what came last was the concept. It was like, we were kind of talking. I realised that Matt had been with the band 10 years. He joined in 2010, and this album was coming out in 2020. And I thought, you got one set of tracks recorded in 2010, one set of tracks that are going to be released in 2020. You could call it 1020. It's the 10 years. It's 10 years since Matt's been in the band. It's a kind of a thing. It means 2010 and 2020. It also maps the kind of the era of modern Wire. It's starting to be a thing. It's not just the odd journalist and me that says, Wire have had a run of records over the last 10 years, which are really strong and as good as anything they've ever released. And, that normally people say the first of those records is Red Bark Tree. Mm-hmm. And so this spans this period this is contemporary Wire. So it's, but there's also this fantastic gold mine of going into material which is old, and especially from the 80s, and reworking it. So just playing it live and then getting a feel for doing it, on a record. I mean, there's a lot of 1020 which has been in other in other versions in other places, and that is the 2020 set. Were we playing it more often, that would be better known. It features other things kind of mined from the past, things which didn't quite achieve greatness first time round, which are good songs, which are being taken somewhere else by the band. And I think that's just a very interesting. You've got new material. Well, everybody understands what new material is, and you've got old material, and everybody understands what old material is. But then why also have new old material? As well as new material. I mean, this is so that's how we do, and that's how we talk, actually.
Yeah, it's very refreshing. Now, what role does vinyl play with Wire? I would imagine that the vinyl revival has contributed positively to Wire and the business of pinkflag.com. Would I be right in that?
Vinyl is a kind of an essential of life. I mean, I'm not a format. I'm format agnostic, and I think all artists should be. I think if I see any artist saying things like, well, our record's way cooler on vinyl, and people who listen to it on Spotify are obviously lesser beings. I mean, this is not. If people are consuming our music, then I'm very happy for them to do it in whatever form that they want to do it. It's not a religious act. If you like vinyl and you like to handle it, you like the way it feels and the way it looks, you like to invest in it because it supports a section of the industry, great. Absolutely great, but don't be a snob about it.
Colin, thank you so much for that wonderful chat, the journey of yourself and Wire. I do want to encourage folks to visit pinkflag.com. There they can order all sorts of materials from the Wire back catalog and check out the new albums Hive and 1020. Those are available on all streaming services. I've been enjoying them immensely here at home, and I'm about to order the vinyl as well. And again, Colin, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope you guys get back to touring soon.
Thank you very much, and we hope so too.
All right, there we go. Mr. Colin Newman of the band Wire. I enjoyed that conversation. If you enjoyed that conversation, you want to hear more of it, of course, you can always go up to our Patreon page, patreon.com/vinylguide. Help sponsor the podcast, and there's a whole extended interview up there, plus a bunch of other stuff, secret episodes, extended interviews, etc. Plus, you help support this podcast. Of course, all Wire fans probably already know about pinkflag.com. If you don't, go up there and poke around. A lot of content at pinkflag.com. Of course, you can also order the new albums Hive and 1020. Both of them are absolutely stellar. You could stream them, try before you buy, or you could ask your local record shop for a copy, and they'll get it in for you. Again, Colin, thank you so much for coming on the show and for spending that time with us. And that is it for this week's episode of The Vinyl Guide. Hey, everyone. Again, I really appreciate all you folks who are sharing these podcasts, these episodes on your social media. Please continue to do so. And it's a huge favor when you guys get up there and write us positive reviews, giving us 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 on Apple iTunes or Stitcher, or wherever you get the podcast. That is a huge help. Please continue to do that, and I'll be ever so grateful. And that is it. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Oh, I can't wait to share this one with you guys, and hopefully my voice will be a bit better too. So, till we talk next time, keep spinning. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.